Before there were lands or laws, before even the idea of light or shadow, there was the void, a silence without measure. From that endless nothing drifted powers, vast and distant, minds so great that to mortals they would seem like entire worlds. These were the outer gods, entities that existed beyond time, beyond stars, and beyond understanding. Each carried a vision for creation. Some desired unending flame, others ceaseless rot or chaos without form, and among them was one that sought structure, a will that dreamed of order. This presence was called the Greater Will, where the other outer gods reached through whispers, curses, or plagues. The Greater Will acted with deliberate purpose. It did not wish to merely influence the world, it wished to claim it, but it could not enter the world directly. So, it sent a messenger, a golden star hurled through the void. The star burned with perfect light, crossing ages and worlds, until it fell upon the young and shapeless realm that would one day be known as the lands between. When the star struck the earth, the heavens flared with gold. From the crater rose a creature that was not born but forged. Its body shimmered like liquid metal, its form both beast and divinity. This was the Elden Beast, a servant and vassal of the Greater Will. Its eyes, its voice, its hand, and within its heart burned a radiant sigil, a divine equation made of countless runes. Together they formed the Elden Ring, a perfect mechanism of control, a metaphysical lattice that defined the laws of existence. Where the Elden Beast walked, the world aligned around it. The Elden Ring was not a weapon, nor an artifact of destruction. It was a script, the language of the Greater Will written upon the world. Its purpose was to impose logic, to bind the wild forces of nature into harmony. Through it, the Greater Will sought to replace the chaos of creation with a single luminous truth. When the Elden Beast descended, the world changed. The air grew still, the sea found rhythm, life began to move according to unseen laws. Cause followed effect, and effect became cause in an endless circle, the law of causality. What was born yearned to return to its source, the law of regression. These two principles formed the foundation of the Golden Order to come. In the centuries that followed, life began to adapt to this new pattern. The wild lands that had once roared with storms and unbridled power grew quiet under the golden sky. The runes of order pulsed beneath the soil, seeding a new creation, and from that radiant soil, something extraordinary began to grow. It started as a sapling, a faint shimmer in the earth where the star had fallen. Then, with time, it rose higher and broader than any living thing before it. Its trunk glowed like molten gold. Its branches stretched toward the heavens. The light that radiated from its leaves painted the land in perpetual dawn. This was the Erdtree, the living vessel of the Elden Ring's order, and the crown of the Greater Will's design. Where the Erdtree's light fell, life flourished, but not freely. The tree's grace, though warm and nurturing, was also commanding. Creatures and people felt its pull, an invisible guidance that drew them toward its golden heart. The dead, too, were caught in its embrace. Their spirits were drawn back into its roots, their ashes absorbed and reborn within its radiance. Death no longer carried finality. Under the Erdtree, all things were recycled into eternity. For many, this was paradise. The first civilizations grew beneath the golden glow, worshipping the Erdtree as the embodiment of divine benevolence. They built shrines and altars to honor its grace. They sang hymns to the Greater Will, though they did not yet understand its nature. They believed they were chosen, that life beneath the Erdtree's branches was perfection made manifest. To them, immortality was proof of divine favor. But far from the golden light, in the deep valleys and forgotten hollows of the world, older powers watched and recoiled. There were forces that remembered the time before order, entities born from the raw crucible of life, when beasts, spirits, and men had not yet been divided. They felt the Erdtree's grace as an intrusion, a burning that scoured away the old world's truths. Where golden light reached, shadow fled. What had once been whole and untamed became subject to law. In the darkness beneath the roots, resentment began to take shape. The spirits of the ancient world, of the great tree, of the crucible, of life before separation, understood that something vast and alien had claimed dominion over the earth. They whispered to one another of the star that fell from the heavens, of the beast that bore order, and of the law that bound even the wind. What was once creation unbridled was now a garden fenced by divine will. The greater will's victory was not one of violence, but of transformation. It did not conquer with fire or blade. It conquered by rewriting reality itself. In time, all memory of the age before the Erdtree faded, becoming myth, and myth became heresy. To question the tree was to defy life itself. The old powers were named impure, the great tree was forgotten, and so began the first true age of order, ruled not by kings or armies, but by law made flesh. Yet even perfection has a shadow. Deep beneath the golden roots, remnants of the old life endured, dormant, waiting. The crucible's wild essence still stirred within the hearts of certain beings, and though they would come to be shunned, cursed, and cast aside in the ages ahead, their existence proved one truth: the greater will could not erase that chaos and creation are one, and that even in the brightest light, darkness remembers its name. This was the beginning, the dawn of all things, when a golden star fell upon a silent world, and the fate of the lands between was forever bound to the will of something far beyond its sky. Part 2. The Crucible Age. Long before the Erdtree's golden light crowned the skies, the world of the lands between was alive in a different way. It was a place of tangled forms and molten life, where creation had not yet learned discipline. This was the age of the Crucible, an era when everything that breathed, crawled or rooted was bound together in a single living unity. There was no separation between plant and beast, between spirit and flesh. All were woven into the same primordial tapestry. At the heart of this living chaos stood the great tree. Its trunk was vast and gnarled, its bark dark as iron, and its roots sank deep into the world's first womb. The crucible itself, it was not a tree in the sense mortals would later understand, but a conduit of all living essence. From its roots flowed rivers of power, and in its shadow forms shifted endlessly. Scales sprouted upon birds, horns grew from men, and wings beat upon the backs of serpents. The great tree did not give birth to life as the Erdtree later would. It absorbed it, blended it, and returned it again in new forms. To exist beneath its boughs was to be part of an unbroken cycle of transformation. In that age, life knew no hierarchy. The strong and the small shared the same pulse. Spirits roamed freely among beasts, and death was not an ending, but a merging back into the crucible's wholeness. The land was radiant in its strangeness, a wilderness of impossible shapes, of rivers that sang with the voices of the dead, and mountains whose veins carried light instead of stone. The world had not yet been organized by law or fate. It was still a song without rhythm. The beings who thrived in this chaos were unlike any who came after. Some were ancient spirits clothed in bark and flame. Others were flesh, given will by the great tree's sap. Among them walked creatures that would in later ages be cursed for their resemblance to this lost perfection, the omen born with horns that echoed the Crucible's ancient design, the misbegotten whose forms blended man and beast, and the Crucible Knights warriors, touched by the old power, who would later serve the Erdtree itself. In this age, they were not abominations, they were divine. The Crucible's strength lay in its lack of separation. It did not seek purity or purpose. It was life without intention. To touch it was to feel the heartbeat of creation itself. But such freedom came with a cost. Without law or order, conflict was constant, though meaningless. Beings fought, died, and were reborn again in endless variation. From this eternal storm of transformation, the great tree grew mightier, feeding on the chaos of its children. It became both the source and the devourer of life. Creation and consumption made one. When the greater will's light first reached the lands between, it found a world too wild to control. The Elden Beast descended like a second sun, and the golden radiance of its order spilled across the land. The Crucible recoiled. For the first time, its rhythms were interrupted. What had once flowed in a seamless circle began to split. The Erdtree's light pierced the great tree's canopy, and the unity of all life fractured into categories: mortal, spirit, beast, god. The old world shuddered, and in that moment, the Crucible began to die. The transformation was not sudden, but creeping. The great tree's roots turned pale and brittle where the golden light touched them. The wild incantations once used to channel its power, the aspects of the Crucible began to change as well. Where once they were sung as blessings of creation, they now burned the skin of those who practiced them. The people who had lived by the Crucible's ways were branded impure. The omens, once sacred, were locked away. The misbegotten, once children of divine hybridity, were enslaved and despised, and the knights of the Crucible, unable to turn away from the old faith, became relics of a forgotten age. To the faithful of the new order, the Crucible was a memory of sin. Its forms, its wings, tails, horns, were seen as reminders of chaos and imperfection. The Golden Order would later name them symbols of regression, but in truth, they were the original language of life. The Crucible tree armor, the aspects of the Crucible incantations, and the old rites that carried its power all testify that this first faith was not destroyed, only buried. Still, the world did not forget. Deep beneath the Erdtree's spreading roots, the remains of the great tree endured. They wound through the soil like veins of dark fire, pulsing with the memory of creation's first form. In catacombs built around these ancient roots, souls of heroes and beasts alike were interred, their ashes rejoining the great tree's lingering essence. The priests of the new faith would tell that these tombs honored grace, but their placement betrayed an older truth. They rested not beside the Erdtree's roots, but within the remnants of the Crucible's domain. And so the world stood divided. Above ground, the light of the Erdtree promised order, grace, and immortality. Below, in the depths and forgotten places, the Crucible's remnants whispered of freedom, of a time when life and death were not ruled by law. This quiet opposition would never fade completely. Across the ages, its echoes would resurface in those who bore the mark of the old world, in horns, in wings, in bloodlines that refused to obey the golden laws. The greater will had imposed its vision upon the lands between, but it had not erased the Crucible. Life could be bent toward order, but never fully tamed. The great tree's shadow lingered, unseen yet eternal, beneath the glow of the Erdtree's roots, and in that shadow, the seeds of rebellion, of imperfection and transformation continued to stir. Thus ended the age of the Crucible, and began the long ascendancy of gold. Yet every age that follows would carry, hidden in its veins, the memory of that first living chaos, the truth that the world itself once breathed as one. Part 3. The Age of the Erdtree. The age of the Erdtree began not with peace, but with conquest. The golden light that shone upon the lands between was both blessing and dominion. Where it reached, the laws of the greater will took hold, rewriting the rhythms of life itself. The chaos of the Crucible was overthrown, and in its place rose a divine hierarchy built upon grace. To the faithful, this was salvation. To the forgotten, it was subjugation. Amid this transformation emerged a being unlike any before, a mortal who would rise to godhood. Her name was Marika, of the Numen race, born beyond the lands between. The Numen were long-lived, seldom born, and said to descend from the denizens of another world. What drew the attention of the greater will to Marika is unknown, but the two fingers, envoys of that divine power, chose her as its vessel. In doing so, she became an Empyrean, a mortal candidate to embody the Elden Ring itself. To serve her, the two fingers granted Marika a companion, a shadow. This creature, bound by oath and faith, would act as her guardian and executor. It was named Marliketh, and he was more than a protector. He was her reflection, where Marika was divine light. Marliketh was shadow incarnate. He would bear her will without hesitation or doubt. In time, Marika was chosen to become the vessel of the Elden Ring, to contain and wield the divine logic of order. In her hands, the laws of the world found new expression, and the Golden Order was born. Under her rule, life and death, faith and sin, cause and consequence were all given purpose. The greater will had found its God. Yet even a god may question her own creation. When Marika beheld the nature of the world's law, she saw imperfection. In the design of the Elden Ring, there existed a rune that defined the end of all things, the rune of death, also known as destined death. To Marika, it was a flaw, a shadow within perfection. To remove it was to make the world eternal. Thus she commanded Maliketh to take the rune of death from the Elden Ring and guard it as his charge. The act was one of divine rebellion and divine genius both, for in a single moment, Marika severed mortality from fate. Death became no longer a natural law, but a power under her control. Maliketh carried the rune within his blade, known thereafter as the Black Blade, and from that day forth, death itself obeyed the will of Marika. The world changed again. Life no longer ended, as it once had. The souls of the dead were drawn to the Erdtree, gathered in its roots, and absorbed by its grace. Those who died in faith became part of its radiance, and their memories were preserved as echoes, remembrances, fragments of their essence woven into the divine cycle. The Erdtree had become both heaven and grave. This new order, the Golden Order, spread swiftly. Marika established her capital at Leyndell, a city built in the image of the Erdtree, its streets gilded with veins of gold, and its towers rising like branches toward the sky. At its heart stood the Erdtree's great trunk, visible from every corner of the realm. The faithful came from every land to kneel beneath it, and in time even the gods of old bent to its law. or were destroyed by it. The two fingers, servants of the greater will, acted as its oracles. They spoke not with voices, but through movement, their gestures interpreted by finger readers who translated divine signs into words of faith. They proclaimed Marika the Eternal, vessel of the Elden Ring, and Mother of Grace, and for a time the world prospered beneath her reign. But order requires opposition to define itself, and not all accepted the Erdtree's dominion. In the far north, the fire giants resisted. They worshipped a fell flame, a god of destruction that could burn even the Erdtree. Their war against Marika's armies raged across frozen mountains, and though the golden host prevailed, the victory was costly. The fire giants were nearly annihilated, their god sealed within an eternal flame that even Marika could not extinguish. To the west, the Stormlord ruled the skies with unending tempests. His domain defied the calm of the Golden Order, and so Marika sent her champion to bring him low. That champion was her consort, once a barbarian known as Hoharaluz, a warrior of unmatched strength. When he pledged himself to Marika, he became Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. His might and leadership unified the realm beneath gold, and his wars laid the foundation for Marika's age. The Crucible Knights, descendants of the old faith, fought for him in these wars. Their wings and horns, once symbols of the primordial age, became emblems of strength, repurposed for the golden cause. They brought ruin to the giants, the dragons, and the ancient gods who had once ruled pieces of the world. Victory by victory, the Erdtree's light spread until none could stand against it. Marika and Godfrey reigned together, their union marking the height of divine order. From them were born children who would inherit divine grace, Godwyn the Golden, and the twin Omen sons, Morgoth and Moga. These demigods, touched by both mortal and divine blood, formed what would be called the Golden Lineage. Under their rule, the lands between flourished, and the Erdtree's light reached its brightest hour. Yet, beneath the splendor of Lendel, unease lingered. The Omen children, marked by horns, and the power of the Crucible, were hidden away, reminders of the world before order. The priests preached perfection, but their god's family bore the scars of the old age. Even paradise casts a shadow, and in those shadows, doubt began to take root. For Marika, the removal of death had brought peace, but also stagnation. Without death, there could be no renewal. Souls that once flowed freely through life's cycles now rested in the Erdtree's roots, unchanging. The world endured, but it no longer grew. In her wisdom, Marika began to question the will of the very power she served. Her reign had brought the world under law, yet she saw that perfection imposed by force could not last. Every victory against chaos carried within it the seed of another rebellion, and though her people called her eternal, Marika knew that even order must one day fracture. In this realization lies the first crack in the Golden Age, a quiet, almost invisible fracture that would in time split the world in two. Part 4. The Lineages of Golden Moon. The age of the Erdtree brought prosperity to many, but the world's order was never absolute. Beyond the reach of Lendel's golden towers, other powers still glimmered. Some bent the knee to Marika's rule, while others stood apart, guided by their own stars and gods. Among these distant realms was Lineages of the Lakes, a land of moonlight, mist, and quiet defiance. Lineages was ruled not by warriors, but by scholars, the Carians, a royal family whose wisdom rivaled the might of the Golden Order. Their queen, Renala, was a sorceress of profound intellect and grace. She was both ruler and scholar, the matriarch of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, where the art of glintstone sorcery was studied as both science and religion. To the Carian people, the moon was not a symbol of rebellion, but of reflection, a softer light that illuminated where the sun could not. As the Golden Order spread across the lands between, its armies reached the shores of Larunia. Radagon, champion of the Erdtree and master of golden incantations, led the invasion. He was the perfect warrior of the Order, a man of fire and devotion, his crimson hair said to blaze like his faith. Under his command, the Erdtree's host marched upon the moonlit halls of the Carian royal family. The war that followed was long and bitter. The Carian knights, gifted in both sorcery and steel, stood as Laronia's first and final defense. According to their surviving relics, fewer than 20 knights fought under the royal banner, yet each was said to be a match for 100 men. Their blades were conduits of celestial magic. Their shields mirrored the phases of the moon. Against Radagon's golden host, they held the line, not with numbers, but with brilliance. But as history often turns, war gave way to something else. In the heat of battle, Radagon and Renewal saw in each other a reflection neither expected, two souls driven by devotion to higher truths. He, the champion of the Erdtree, saw in her the calm of the moon. She, the queen of sorcery, saw in him the fire of faith. Their hearts turned from conquest to unity, and in time their houses joined. The war between gold and moon ended not in annihilation, but in marriage. Radagon cleansed himself of blood and sin with celestial dew, a Carian rite of repentance, and swore loyalty to Renala and her line. Their union bound the light of the Erdtree and the glow of the moon in fragile harmony. For a while the lands between knew a peace unlike any before it. The moonlight of Larunia mingled with the golden rays of the capital, and the Erdtree's followers called this the Age of Accord. From their marriage came 3 children, each touched by destiny in ways even the greater will could not have foreseen. Their first was Rani, who inherited her mother's lunar soul and her father's quiet defiance. Then came Radon, mighty and ambitious, who bore his father's red hair and his mother's fascination with the stars. And last was Rakard, the youngest, whose heart burned with curiosity and whose faith would one day twist into heresy. Each of these children would in time forge their own path, but for now they were the promise of a new lineage. Through them, the Erdtree and the moon were bound by blood. Yet in the capital, the union was not met with joy. Many in Lendel viewed Radagon's loyalty to the Carian queen as betrayal. To them, the moon was a rival light, pale and indirect, a reflection rather than a source. The Golden Order tolerated no equals, but Marika did not strike him down, whether by divine foresight or by a mother's restraint. She allowed his choices to unfold. In Liurnia, life continued beneath the tranquil glow of the moon. The Academy of Raya Lucaria prospered, its scholars probing the mysteries of the cosmos. They believed that the stars held knowledge older even than the Erdtree, a power untouched by the greater will. Their glintstones were shards of fallen stars, each one a vessel for a fragment of that ancient intelligence. Under Renala's guidance, magic became an act of communion with the heavens. But celestial knowledge has a way of slipping through mortal hands. Within the Academy, factions began to form. Some sought to deepen their understanding of the stars. Others, drawn by the Erdtree's promise of stability, began to align with the Golden Order. And in the midst of this quiet division, whispers arose that Radagon, the consort of Renala, the champion of the moon, had been called back to the capital. The summons came not from mortal lips, but from the very heart of the Erdtree, for reasons unknown, Marika had chosen Radagon to return and stand beside her as Elden Lord. It was said that he left Lorenia in silence, taking only his faith and his sword. He left behind his wife, his children, and the moonlit peace he had built. The reason for his recall, whether penance, purpose, or prophecy, remains one of the great mysteries of the lands between. Renala was broken by his departure. Her heart, once a beacon of calm, became a storm. She withdrew into the academy, clutching a relic of her husband, a great amber egg said to contain the remnants of their union. The scholars who had once served her turned away, their loyalty divided between their queen and their faith in gold. In time the academy fractured, and civil war swept through Liurnia. The Carians retreated to their manor in the north, while the Erdtree's influence spread once more through the lowlands. Rani, Raden, and Rykard each bore the scar of their father's departure. Rani turned inward, her eyes fixed on the stars. Raden took command of the armies of Keled, mastering gravity magic to hold back the very cosmos. And Rykard delved into forbidden knowledge, seeking power in the depths where gods dared not tread. From this shattered peace, two lineages emerged, the line of gold, ruled by Marika and Radagon, and the line of the moon, the descendants of Renella. Their union, once a symbol of harmony, became the seed of division. The Erdtree and the moon, two lights that once shared the same sky, now cast rival shadows across the lands between. And though Marika and Radagon would soon be joined again, it would not be by marriage, but by revelation, a truth that would unravel the world itself. Part 5. The Fracture of Order. Even the brightest light casts a shadow. As the golden age of Marika and Radagon reached its height, the first cracks began to form in the foundations of order. The Erdtree stood magnificent and unchallenged, yet beneath its roots, unrest stirred. The greater will had imposed its law upon the lands between, but not even divine perfection could silence the hunger for truth. Marika, the Eternal, had long been the vessel of the Elden Ring. Through her, the greater will ruled, and through her, the world was bound by law. Yet, as centuries passed, she began to doubt the very perfection she upheld. In her moments of solitude, she spoke of faith as a journey rather than a destination, of law as something to be questioned, not obeyed blindly. In her words, recorded by those closest to her, I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order. Through understanding of the proper way, our faith is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. Why must ye falter? It was not rebellion yet, but curiosity, a dangerous curiosity for a god. Marika sought to understand the source of grace itself. Why must all things return to the Erdtree? Why must the greater will's design be eternal? Her questions reverberated through her followers, sowing both reverence and fear. Meanwhile, the children of her divided lineages began to move. The demigods of gold and moon grew in ambition, each seeking purpose within or beyond the Erdtree's light. Among them was Rani, daughter of Radagon and Renala, an Empyrean in her own right, chosen by the Two Fingers as a potential successor to Marika. Yet Rani's heart was distant from the Golden Order. She looked not to the Erdtree for truth, but to the stars, where her mother's moon reflected borrowed light. Rani sought the cold, ancient flame of her own destiny. In secret, she communed with those who opposed the will of the greater will, unseen powers from the cosmos. Among them was a being the priests of the Erdtree feared even to name, the two fingers shadow, the emissary of an outer god of cold and night. Through these whispers, Rani learned of a way to break free from the greater will's grasp, to end the cycle of grace entirely. Her plan would begin with death. In the years following Radagon's return to Leyndell, the divine pair ruled as one, or so it appeared to mortal eyes. They were husband and wife, god and consort, united in the perfection of order, but in truth, something deeper was taking shape. The priests spoke in riddles about the Elden Lord's likeness, how it was impossible to carve without seeing the secret within. Some whispered that Radagon and Marika were one and the same, two forms of a single divine being, divided between order and regression, cause and effect. To others, this was heresy. But for Marika, it was revelation. The god who governed order was both male and female, both law and question, both creation and fracture. Then, one night, the world shifted. The rune of death, long guarded by Maliketh, was stolen. No mortal could have taken it. It was a fragment of divine law, yet one did. In the shadows of the Erdtree, Rani stole a piece of destined death and bound it to her will. The rune's essence, once pure and sealed, was now weaponized. The first victim of that theft was not a tyrant, nor an enemy of the gods. It was Godwyn the Golden, beloved son of Marika and Godfrey, the firstborn of the Golden lineage. On that night, death returned to the lands between. Accounts differ on how it happened. Some say Rani's assassins struck through shadow, their blades imbued with destined death. Others claim that the curse spread like a tide, blackening Godwyn's soul from within. What is known is this: he did not die in body, but in spirit. His flesh endured, radiant and fair, while his soul withered and sank into the roots of the Erdtree. His was the first soulless death, the first corruption within the tree's holy order. The world mourned, but the greater will did not answer. The two fingers fell silent, their gestures still, and in that silence, something inside Marika broke. She saw in her son's death, not tragedy, but truth, the proof that the Golden Order could not protect even its own. The Erdtree, which promised eternity, had allowed rot to take root in its heart. In her grief, she turned to the Elden Ring and shattered it. No one knows what weapon she used, or what moment drove her hand. Some say she struck it herself in fury. Others claim she commanded Radagon, her other self, to do it. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. The Elden Ring, the divine logic of the world, was broken into countless fragments. The Golden Order ceased to function. The Erdtree's light dimmed, and the grace that bound the lands between began to flicker and fade. The Shattering had begun. The demigods, each claiming descent from divinity, turned against one another. The fragments of the Elden Ring, the great runes, became symbols of power, each carrying a portion of divine law. Those who held them became more than mortal, but less than whole. They fought to claim the throne of Elden Lord, each believing themselves the rightful heir to a broken order. The lands between descended into chaos. Cities burned, armies vanished in golden flame. The Erdtree sealed itself, refusing even the faithful who sought its grace. And high above, in the ruins of Leyndell's throne room, Marika's shattered form was bound within the Erdtree itself, imprisoned by the very order she had undone. Radagon, whether as her consort or her reflection, tried to mend what was lost. He gathered the shards of the ring, sought to restore its perfect design, but every attempt failed. The fractures were too deep. Law itself had been broken, and no divine will could rewrite it again. In the centuries that followed, the age of the Erdtree gave way to ruin. Grace dimmed to embers. The Tarnished, descendants of Godfrey's exiled warriors, began to stir, called back to the lands between by faint whispers of lost light. Their journey would mark the beginning of a new age, born from the ashes of the old. And at the center of it all, the question Marika had once asked lingered, unanswered. If the Golden Order could not protect life from death, then what was its purpose? The Shattering had not merely broken the world, it had exposed its truth, that even a god's order is fragile, and that every law, no matter how divine, carries within it the seed of its own undoing. Part 6. The Age of the Shattering. When the Elden Ring was broken, the world did not end. It lost its center. The divine law that once held the lands between in balance scattered into fragments, each glowing with stolen power. Where once there had been harmony, now there was hunger. The age of peace under the Erdtree gave way to an age of ambition, of war, and of silence from the gods. It was the age of the Shattering. The first to feel the loss of order were the demigods, the children of Marika and her consorts. Each bore the blood of divinity, and each inherited a fragment of the ring, a great rune, when it fell. These runes, carved from the shattered logic of the world, granted strength beyond comprehension, but they also cursed their bearers with desire, for to hold one fragment was to long for the whole. Across the lands between, the demigods turned against one another. Brothers raised armies against sisters, and children against their divine parents. Each sought to claim the throne of Elden Lord, believing that by restoring the Elden Ring, they might inherit the right to rule the world. But no one could mend what Marika had broken. The War of the Great Runes. The first of these wars was waged in the east, in the scarlet plains of Caelid. There, General Radon, son of Radagon and Renala, made his stand, a colossus of muscle and might. Radon had mastered the gravity of the stars themselves, not to destroy them, but to hold them still, halting their motion in the heavens. His power was absolute, his will unbending. To his soldiers, he was a living god. To his enemies, a force of nature. Yet even he could not escape the madness that followed the Shattering. His great rune twisted his mind, and when the scarlet rot of his half-sister, Melania, met his strength on the battlefield, the world itself was scarred. The Battle of Ionia was the most terrible of all. There, Radon and Melania, the severed daughter of Marika and Radagon, fought for days without end. Melania, born cursed with the scarlet rot, wielded her affliction as a weapon, her blade blooming with petals of crimson death. When their duel reached its end, she unleashed her full might, and the rot spread across Caelid like wildfire. Neither victory nor death followed, only ruin. Radon was left mindless, his body devoured by decay, his soul wandering beneath a sky he could no longer hold. Elsewhere, Rykard, their brother, turned from godly war to blasphemy. Deep beneath Mount Delmere, he sought communion, not with grace, but with the great serpent, an ancient god of devouring. He offered himself willingly, body and soul, to become one with it. Join me, he whispered to his followers, and together we shall feed the gods to the flames. Thus the Lord of Blasphemy was born, his great rune pulsing with the power of rebellion itself. In the capital, Morgott, the Ermin king, claimed the throne of Lendel, though shunned for his horns and cursed lineage. He defended the Erdtree with unyielding faith. He called himself the last true king of gold, even as the Erdtree denied him entry. Beneath his rule, the city became both sanctuary and tomb, a place where devotion lingered, even as grace faded. Meanwhile, his twin Moog turned from the Erdtree entirely. Drawn by whispers from the blood itself, he founded the Moogwyn dynasty, a subterranean empire devoted to the formless mother, one of the many outer gods. There, in his crimson palace, he sought to raise a new god, his brother Miquella, whom he stole from his cocoon of slumber. But Miquella's body, pure and luminous, remained unresponsive. The god of blood waited eternally beside a dream that would not wake. Far to the north, Melania wandered, her body rotting, her spirit unbroken. Her devotion to her brother Miquella was absolute. Where she walked, scarlet flowers bloomed, symbols of both grace and decay. Her great rune carried the paradox of her being unyielding strength, born from disease, beauty made from ruin. Thus the world was divided, not between good and evil, but between fragments of truth. Each demigod carried a different reflection of the Elden Ring's purpose, and none could see the whole. Wars burned across generations, their victors forgotten, their battlefields cursed, and all the while the Erdtree loomed silent, its branches glowing faintly above a world that no longer understood its light. The silence of the Erdtree. After the Shattering, the Erdtree sealed itself. No grace flowed from its roots. The two fingers, envoys of the greater will, fell into dormancy, their movements still, their oracles mad with silence. Priests and knights alike searched for meaning, but there was no voice from above. The greater will, it seemed, had abandoned the lands between. In this void of faith, new cults rose, the frenzied flame, the formless mother, the scarlet rot, and countless others. Each promised its own kind of freedom, each a rival to the greater will, yet none offered true salvation, only transformation. The world was a graveyard of half-forgotten gods. It was in this chaos that the Tarnished began to stir. Long ago, when Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, was stripped of his grace and cast from the lands between, his warriors followed him into exile. They wandered distant lands, waging endless wars, their faith tempered in hardship. Marika had promised them that when grace called again, they would return to reclaim what was lost. Now, after ages uncounted, that promise was fulfilled. One by one, the Tarnished felt a faint light within, a golden whisper that urged them home. Drawn by unseen hands, they crossed the sea and returned to the broken realm of their ancestors. But the world they found was no longer the one their forebears had known. The thrones of the gods were empty. The Erdtree's light burned, but did not bless. The fragments of the Elden Ring lay scattered, guarded by the mad and the mighty, guided by the grace of the Erdtree, or perhaps by something else entirely. The Tarnished set out to gather the great runes and restore the Elden Ring. Some sought glory, others redemption, and some merely the truth. But in the end, all would be drawn into the same struggle, not just for power, but for meaning in a world where even gods could die. The new age dawns. As the Tarnished rose, so too did old powers awaken. The greater will stirred once more, its envoys twitching in their tombs of gold. The Erdtree's silence cracked with faint whispers of guidance, but whether this was divine mercy or manipulation, none could say. For every age that began under the Erdtree ended the same, in doubt. The wars of the demigods had consumed kingdoms, and the scars of their folly marked every land. The Rote of Caelid, the serpentine blasphemy of Gelmir, the burning peaks of the giants, all stood as monuments to a truth that no one wished to face, that the Shattering had not merely broken the Elden Ring, it had broken the very idea of order itself. The Tarnished would rise to challenge that truth. Some would seek to repair it, others to replace it, and still others to destroy it entirely. Their paths would lead them through the ashes of gods and the remnants of ages. And though history would remember only one who became Elden Lord, in truth, every Tarnished carried a spark of that ancient rebellion, the defiance that began the day Marika struck the ring. Thus the age of the Shattering passed into legend, an age not of endings, but of possibility. The lands between lay in ruin, its gods silent, its faith fractured, and yet, in the hearts of those who still walked beneath the Erdtree's fading light, a new story was waiting to be told. Part 7. The Age of the Tarnished. The Age of the Tarnished began as a whisper, a faint call that stirred in the souls of those long forgotten by grace. It was not the roar of divine command that once shook the heavens, but something quieter, more personal. One by one, warriors, scholars, and wanderers across distant lands awoke with a golden glimmer in their hearts. It was the echo of a promise made long ago by Queen Marika herself, that when the time was right, Grace would call her exiled children home. These were the Tarnished, descendants of the first Elden Lord, Godfrey, and of the warriors who had once marched beside him in glory. Cast from the lands between after his wars were won, they had roamed foreign realms for countless generations, forgotten, mortal, and faithless, yet the spark of grace remained within them, dormant, waiting for this very moment. Now, with the Elden Ring shattered and the gods silent, that light flickered anew, guiding them back to a broken homeland. The long march home, the first to return, came by sea. Their ships weathered by ages of exile, they found the lands between transformed, a place both familiar and alien. The Erdtree still towered above the horizon, but its golden light no longer offered warmth. It glowed like an ember rather than a sun, beautiful yet distant. The cities of gold lay quiet, their streets patrolled by ghosts of faith and forgotten knights. And in the wilds, the remnants of the Shattering still burned, rot, flame, and madness, clinging to every horizon. But the call of grace was insistent. It did not speak in words, but through direction. Faint trails of light that shimmered in the air, pointing the way forward. These rays led the Tarnished towards sites of grace, ancient points of power, where remnants of the Erdtree's blessing still lingered. There, they could rest, remember, and rise again. For though the world had changed, one truth remained. A Tarnished cannot die so long as grace remembers them. In the ruins of the past, they found whispers of their heritage. The tales of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, had become legend. He was remembered as the Lion of Gold, the unbroken blade of the Erdtree, but few knew the truth, that his grace had been stripped away by Marika herself. In her final act before his exile, she told him, "My lord and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, you will wage war in a land afar. Then after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed." This promise had taken lifetimes to fulfill, and now her words echoed through time, the Erdtree calling her lost soldiers back for one final trial. The lands between in ruin, the Tarnished returned to find a realm divided beyond recognition. The once golden capital of Leyndell stood hollow, guarded by the Omen King Morgoth, who ruled in isolation. Khalid had become a wasteland, choked by scarlet rot, and haunted by the remnants of Raden's army. Leonia, once the land of scholars, was shrouded in mist and moonlight, its queen Renala lost to grief and madness. To the west, the volcano manor burned with heresy under the serpent lord Rykard, while far to the north, the Erdtree of Miquella glimmered faintly, a secret promise of salvation, untouched by the Erdtree's law. The wars of the demigods had left behind, not victory, but silence. Their ambitions had destroyed kingdoms and birthed monstrosities. The gods were gone, their followers broken into warring sects, and amidst this decay, the Tarnished rose, guided by grace not to serve the old order, but to surpass it. The guidance of grace. Each Tarnished was led by grace, along a different path. Some followed faith, seeking to restore the golden order. Others sought power for its own sake, believing that might alone could rebuild the world. And some, the rarest, began to question the meaning of grace itself. Was it truly the will of the greater will that called them, or something else using its name? Their journeys converged in the ruins of Leyndell, at the foot of the sealed Erdtree. There they encountered the two fingers, and their interpreter, the finger reader, Enya, who proclaimed, "The Tarnished are guided by grace to brandish the Elden Ring once more, to become Elden Lord and restore order to the world." But not all accepted this guidance. Some Tarnished turned away from the two fingers, sensing deceit in their riddles. They found other paths, darker, older, and more dangerous. Among them was the frenzied flame, an outer god of chaos that sought to burn the world clean of all order. Its followers preached liberation through destruction, that the only way to end the cycle of law was to erase it entirely. Others sought the formless mother, the god of blood. In secret cathedrals beneath the earth, they offered sacrifice to her crimson pools, believing that through her, new divinity could be born. And far to the north, beneath the snow and silence, some whispered of the three fingers, who burned with madness, yet promised freedom from the tyranny of the greater will. The Tarnished were not a united people. They were mirrors of the world itself, divided by faith, ambition, and fear, but all were drawn by the same desire, to claim the throne at the heart of the Erdtree. The return of Godfrey. Among the countless Tarnished who returned, one was unlike the rest. His name was Hoar Lux, the first of the exiles, the once and future Elden Lord. In ages past, he had set aside his name and fury to serve as Marika's consort, becoming Godfrey, Lord of Gold. But when his wars were won, and no worthy foe remained, his grace had faded, and he was cast out to wander as mortal. Now, when grace called again, he rose from the ashes of obscurity to reclaim his destiny. Godfrey's journey was one of rediscovery. Stripped of title and divine favor, he fought through the ruins of his own legacy, seeking once more to prove his worth. As he ascended through the fallen capital, he cast aside the name of Godfrey and took back his true one, Hoar Lux, warrior of blood. His return was not an act of redemption, but of revelation, that power, not lineage, defines divinity. When at last he faced the spirit of his former self, the ghost of the golden age he had lost, he did not bow, he roared. The Erdtree trembled, and for a moment, even grace seemed to falter. The path to the Erdtree. The journey of the Tarnished was not merely physical, it was spiritual, a pilgrimage through the remains of every age that had come before. Each victory over a demigod was a step closer to understanding the nature of order itself. For in claiming their great runes, the Tarnished did not just gather power, they gathered fragments of the Elden Ring's truth. When they reached the Erdtree at last, its gates stood sealed by divine flame. No Tarnished, no demigod, not even a god could pass. The voice of the two fingers fell silent, and the Erdtree rejected its children. The world had been forsaken once more. Yet even in this final denial, grace persisted, a voice, not divine, but human, spoke to the Tarnished in the dark. It was Melina, a maiden of faded flame, who offered guidance and purpose. She spoke of sacrifice, of kindling the fire that could open the way to the throne. I am Melina. I offer you an accord. I can lead you to the foot of the Erdtree, if you would be Elden Lord. Through her, the Tarnished learned the final truth, that no one could enter the Erdtree without fire, not the fire of grace, but of ruin. And so began the long road to the Forge of the Giants, where the last flame still burned. The path was death itself, yet to walk it was to claim the right to shape the world anew. The cycle renewed. As the Tarnished ascended through flame and ash, they became more than mortal. The grace that once guided them grew faint, replaced by something deeper, will. In their hands lay the fate of the world, to restore the old order, to birth a new one, or to burn it all away. Each choice carried a truth the gods had long concealed, that divinity is not inherited, but earned. And so the age of the Tarnished came to stand upon the threshold of eternity. Whether the Erdtree would blaze again in gold, be reborn in moonlight, or consumed in fire, would depend not on the will of gods, but on the will of one who once walked as mortal. For in the end, the Tarnished were not merely returning exiles. They were the mirror of Marika herself, imperfect, questioning, and unyielding. And just as she had shattered the Elden Ring to seek truth, so too would her children break the world once more in search of their own. Part 8. The Flames of Renewal. The journey to the Erdtree's heart could go no further without fire. The golden gates stood sealed by divine decree, and even the might of the demigods could not pierce them. The age of the Tarnished, for all its struggle and glory, now stood before an impossible wall, one that could only be undone through destruction. To burn the Erdtree was to defy the greater will itself. Yet for those who sought to become Elden Lord, there was no other path. The road to flame. From the moment the Tarnished reached the foot of the Erdtree, grace grew silent. The two fingers, envoys of the greater will, ceased to move, their oracles whispering only fragments of madness. The world seemed to hold its breath. It was then that Melina, the maiden who had walked beside the Tarnished since the beginning, revealed the truth she had long concealed. I am born of the Erdtree, yet it is not my mother. I was made for this purpose, to burn. In the wake of the Shattering, the greater will had forbidden flame, sealing the Erdtree in golden protection. But beyond its reach, in the frozen north, where the Erdtree's light faded, there remained one fire it could not control, the flame of ruin, still guarded by the last of the fire giants. It was an ancient power, older than the Golden Order, and said to have once scorched the Erdtree itself in a war that nearly ended creation. Thus the Tarnished began the perilous ascent to the Forge of the Giants, where that forbidden fire yet burned. The journey led through storm and ice, through the ruins of civilizations forgotten even by the Erdtree's memory. Along the way, they met remnants of the past, ghosts of warriors who had once fought in Marika's wars, still bound by grace long extinguished. Atop the mountain tops of the giants, the land itself seemed to mourn. Winds howled through frozen valleys, and the corpses of ancient titans lay half buried in snow. Here dwelt the last of the fire giants, a solitary guardian cursed to protect the flame that had doomed his kin. Bound by chains of divine wrath, he fought not for faith, but for memory. To defeat him was not victory, but tragedy, the final end of a people erased by order. When at last the guardian fell, his flame passed to the Tarnished. The fire of ruin was theirs to wield, but at a cost. It was not a gentle fire. It consumed all things, even those who bore it. To bring it to the Erdtree meant sacrifice. The choice of sacrifice. At the summit, before the massive forge that had once held the flame of the giants, Melina stood beside the Tarnished. She spoke not as guide, but as destiny. I will be the kindling. I will burn, and you shall become Elden Lord. Her sacrifice would open the way to the Erdtree, burning its thorns and shattering its divine seal. It was an act of devotion and defiance alike, to destroy what she was born from, so that the world might begin anew. The fire she carried was both destruction and renewal, echoing the eternal truth that every age must end before another can rise. Yet even as Melina offered her life, another voice whispered beneath the mountain, the voice of the Three Fingers, deep below the capital, beyond madness and mercy. There burned another flame, the frenzied flame, an outer god of chaos. Unlike the ordered ruin of the giants, this fire sought not renewal, but obliteration. It promised freedom from law itself, a world where all were equal in destruction. To embrace it was to reject the greater will entirely, to become its enemy in spirit and flesh. Those who found the Three Fingers beneath the city's depths were marked forever, their flesh burned, their mind unmade, and their purpose rewritten. No maiden would walk beside them after that, for the frenzied flame needed no guide. It devoured everything, even grace. Thus, the Tarnished stood between two fires, one of sacrifice, one of madness. The choice would define the fate of the world. The burning of the Erdtree. When the forge was lit, the mountains wept flame. The fire roared to life, its glow visible even in the farthest corners of the lands between. The sky turned crimson, and the Erdtree's golden light began to wane. Whether by Melina's hand or by the embrace of chaos, the Erdtree burned. The flames did not consume it at once. The tree resisted, its bark weeping sap that hardened into amber glass. Its roots screamed as though alive, and its light fractured into 1,000 dying rays. But fire is patient. It crept inward, devouring the divine protections, stripping away the illusions of eternity. For the first time since the greater will descended, the Erdtree felt pain. Those who saw the blaze called it the age's end. Priests in Lundel tore out their eyes. The Knights of Gold turned their swords upon one another. Even the Two Fingers withered into silence. Yet in that moment of ruin, something miraculous occurred. The grace of the Erdtree, which had long flickered, flared once more, not as a beacon of control, but as a final gift. It reached out to the Tarnished and drew them into the burning heart of creation. Within the flames, the Tarnished saw visions of all that had come before: the Crucible, the Erdtree, the wars of gods and men. And in the center of it all, they beheld Marika, bound within the heart of the Erdtree, and Radagon, her other self, still trying in vain to repair the broken ring. The final battle. What followed was not merely a battle of flesh, but of purpose. Radagon, radiant in gold, stood as the last defender of order. He fought not with rage, but with sorrow, a god still bound by his duty. Yet as his body fell and his light faded, the truth of the greater will revealed itself. The divine order that had ruled for eons was not sentient mercy, but design, and that design had one final guardian. From the dying god's form rose the Elden Beast, the vassal of the greater will, reborn in pure celestial glory. Its body shimmered with the light of countless runes, its wings stretching across the void like the constellations themselves. It was the living embodiment of the Elden Ring, order given shape, perfection made flesh, and it fought to erase imperfection from existence. The Tarnished, armed with mortal will and fragments of divine power, faced the very logic of the universe. The battle was endless, each strike echoing across time, but when the final blow fell, the light of the Elden Beast shattered, and for the first time since the dawn of the world, the greater will's hand withdrew. The age that follows. With the Elden Beast's fall, the Tarnished stood at the center of creation. Before them lay the fractured Marika, still bound in agony, her form half divine, half human. The fragments of the Elden Ring floated around her like stars, awaiting a new will to shape them. In that moment, the world held its breath once again. What happened next would determine the fate of all things. Some Tarnished chose to restore the Golden Order, mending the ring and reigniting the Erdtree's light. Others sought to begin a new age, of dusk, of chaos, or of stars, guided by the will of those who refused to bow. Still others embraced the frenzied flame, burning all of creation so that nothing might ever rule again. No single ending was absolute. Each was merely a reflection of choice, the same choice Marika once made when she broke the ring. For in every age, gods rise and gods fall. Law endures only until it is questioned, and fire burns only until it consumes itself. Thus the age of the Tarnished came to its close, not with a single truth, but with infinite possibilities. The Erdtree's ashes drifted upon the winds, seeding new life in places untouched by grace. The stars began to move once more, and from their distant light came whispers of new gods, new laws, and new rebellions. For as long as will exists, the flame will rise again, and with it, the story of Elden Ring will never truly end. Part 9. The Eternal Cycle. In the aftermath of the fire, when the Erdtree's ashes had settled across the lands between, silence reigned once more. The gods were gone. The stars, long held in place by divine will, began to drift freely again, and the world, scorched and remade, breathed for the first time without the weight of order pressing upon its chest. The age of the Tarnished had come to an end, and yet it was not an end at all. For in the world of the lands between, endings are never final. The cycle of creation, decay, and rebirth continues without mercy or pause. What the greater will built, the fire unmade, what the fire destroyed, life would one day reclaim, even in ruin. Grace endures, faint, but never extinguished. In the wake of the burning, the Erdtree stood blackened, but unbowed. Its roots still pierced the deep earth, its embers glowing faintly beneath the soil. From these remnants, new life began to bloom. Golden saplings emerged in the ruins of ancient cathedrals. The beasts of the Crucible, long thought extinct, returned to wander through lands that no longer rejected them. The great tree and the Erdtree had become one once more, a single organism of light and shadow, order and chaos intertwined. The peoples of the lands between, left without gods to follow, began to look inward. In the absence of divine command, they turned to one another. Small kingdoms formed around surviving fragments of grace. Some sought to rebuild the Golden Order, clinging to the old faith. Others embraced the chaos of freedom, living without law or prophecy, and still others knelt before the stars, whispering prayers to distant voices that once again moved through the heavens. The age that followed was not one of peace, but of possibility. For every soul that sought to preserve the old world, another dreamed of forging a new one. In their hands, the shards of the Elden Ring gleamed like broken glass, reminders of both the world's perfection and its fragility. Deep beneath the ruins of Lendel, the remnants of divinity lingered. The two fingers, withered and dead, lay curled in silence. Their counterparts, the three fingers, whispered still, promising a fire that would never die. In the mountains, the ashes of the fire giants stirred, their curses echoing through the wind, and far beyond the sight of mortals, the outer gods watched, their influence unbroken. They had never left, only waited. Each still yearned to shape the world in its image, the formless mother through blood, the frenzied flame through ruin, the greater will through order, and others still unnamed, gods of rot, of death, of stars. Their designs clashed endlessly, unseen but ever present, ensuring that no age could ever remain eternal. The lands between had always been their battlefield, and humanity their canvas. In time, even memory of Marika faded into legend. Some called her the goddess who defied the stars, others a heretic who doomed the world. The truth was more complex. She had not destroyed the Elden Ring out of malice, but out of understanding. She saw that order, no matter how divine, was a cage, that the will of gods, however benevolent, could not be trusted to define the meaning of life. By breaking the ring, she had given mortals a gift no god had ever offered: choice. Her shadow, Maliketh, was said to have vanished into the deep, guarding the ashes of destined death until the end of all things. Her children became myths, their deeds retold in countless forms. Radahn, who held the stars; Millennia, who bloomed in rot; Rani, who cast aside her flesh to dwell among the cosmos. Each became not merely a figure of history, but a symbol of what it means to defy destiny. And in the tales of the Tarnished, she lived on, as the god who made imperfection sacred. Through every age, one truth endured: grace and flame are one. Both give life, both destroy, and both are born from will. The Erdtree burned, and yet from its ashes grew new saplings. The fire of ruin consumed the world, and yet from its embers rose light. This duality of order and rebellion, creation and decay, is the essence of existence in the lands between. The Tarnished, who claimed the throne, became not a ruler, but a reflection of the world's eternal conflict. Whether they restored the Golden Order, embraced the stars, or chose the fire, their reign was temporary. In time their laws too would crumble, their followers would lose faith, their world would fade, as all worlds do, and one day another would rise to take their place. For that is the secret written between the runes of the Elden Ring, that no order lasts forever, and no will can rule unchallenged. The greater will, for all its power, was not a god of creation, but of repetition. It sought only to perpetuate itself. The true miracle was not its design, but the rebellion against it. And so, the lands between continued to turn, their skies filled once more with drifting stars, their earth split by roots of gold and ash. The echoes of ancient hymns mingle with the wind, and the spirits of the dead whisper their tales to those who will listen. Somewhere, deep within the charred hollow of the Erdtree, a faint heartbeat still sounds, the rhythm of life persisting against eternity. The story of the Elden Ring is not a tale of triumph or tragedy. It is a hymn to persistence, to the endless struggle between law and freedom, between gods and mortals, between the will to rule and the will to live. Every age ends as it begins, with a spark, a question, and a choice. For as long as fire burns and grace shines, the world will continue, and in every flicker of that light, the cycle begins anew. Thus ends the chronicle of the lands between. Yet even in ending, its story continues, eternal, golden, and forever bound by the will of those who dare to defy it.